Last time we spoke, we talked about art being social, political, or economical. We also said there's no art for art's sake. What that means is if you say I'm producing art because I like producing art, that's a social and political statement which says I'm tired of the world as it is. It's destructive, and I like being creative. I like creating art for people to enjoy. So that's not art for art's sake, but a social political comment on the world. Art is either a comment or expression of a particular social environment. Art may be a political comment or expression of how things are to be governed, or to make one type of people look bad and another people look good, like in the World War II posters that made the Huns or the Hungarians look like monsters. Or it could be a comment about whether the area depicted or expressed in the artwork is a poor area or a rich area, an industrial area, or made for industrial use, commercial use, political use. But what you also have to consider is what era something was created, because that will tell you a lot about certain elements of the piece and why it was handled that way, why certain things were said that way, or what the big deal of this or that was. This is called social context. All art should always be considered according to the social conditions surrounding it. For example, here's a quote from a Netflix original called Frontier. Quote, I believe our society has fell into a pyramid system where there's people relegated to the bottom part of that pyramid and there's people that feel like they're entitled to the top part of that pyramid. Ice Cube, 2016, unquote. This statement by Ice Cube is being used to open up political talk about those on the bottom and top of the pyramid. I work with a guy who came from Africa who lives in America as part of a dual citizenship. He travels back and forth to his homeland at least twice a year. He comes from Igbo land right next to Nigeria. The Yoruba people live in Nigeria. The Hausa are also in Nigeria, but the Yoruba people are firmly in control of that country. Yet, within the homeland of the person I work with, in Igbo land, the Hausa are in control of their political scene. Now, mind you, these are all Africans, just different tribes. Through whatever means, the Hausa now firmly control Igbo land, and they're responsible for smoothing out the rough spots between the two people. Now, the Hausa might consider themselves very fair, but my brother considers the Hausa unjust to his people. Since the Hausa controlled the Igbo people's political environment, they probably controlled their cultural arts, music, and literary environment as well. And if so, then the mainstream publications and reviews on artists within Igbo land are probably Hausa opinionated. I'd sure like to read our Hausa journalist critiques an Igbo artist or musician. Probably not so valued by the Igbo people, I suppose. I bet there's more Igbo writers that have sprung up since the Hausa took over because they probably believe the Hausa don't understand Igbo ways of looking at things, even if they're both black. Now, we black folks that live in America live in a similar situation, but we are two entirely different people from the ones we share the country with. And that situation that Ice Cube spoke about concerning the pyramid applies to us as well. Our people live in America, but the people who started this country are still firmly in control. And though it may appear as though there are many different people in the government, the structure of that government, its codes of conduct, and the laws of the land are fashioned by, and still fashioned by, those people who founded the country. It protects the interests of those people first. Our culture was subject to their culture, and it was reflected in society in various ways. Take our music, for example. Though America's classical music was called jazz and the blues, those were not the names our people called it. And you'd probably have to be about 127 to 136 years of age to have any clue of what our people called it. The reason why I say that is because that's how old Ma Rainey and Charlie Patton was. Those two went down in America's history as the first blues records ever recorded. But even that story was subject to how mainstream America wanted to tell it. They were born in 1891 and 1882, respectively. Ma Rainey was incarnated 19 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation was the document that freed us from slavery. We were freed from slavery, but without money, and therefore we had no means of providing or maintaining food, clothing, and shelter. So we had to seek employment from the same stock of people that we were just freed from. Over time, some of us were able to secure a livelihood and even make businesses for ourselves, some through entertainment. But the means of recording records were firmly in the hands of mainstream society and not amongst our people. We live in an environment where the people who started this society are totally different than us. Once in America, we were considered property and considered by some of these people as inferior. And that was the social, political, and economic content in which we found ourselves living in from that time to the 1920s. And if you listen close enough to our old blues records, you'll find evidence of those social conditions written right into the songs. Now, as I said, mainstream society calls our music jazz and blues, but they didn't always call it that. I think they changed the name in more modern times to be more politically correct. Race music was the term used by the record industry of mainstream America to categorize practically all types of black music during that time. But where did this term race music and race records come from? Before 1920, there was hardly any market on major labels for black artists because Americans' major labels were supplying mainstream America with white singers on their labels. However, a lesser known label owned by Otto K. E. Heinemann, OK Records for short, which is a play on his initials, came into existence in 1918. OK Records issued popular songs, dance numbers, and vaudeville acts, but most of all, it specialized in rarities. In 1920, a black composer by the name of Perry Bradford convinced the owner to take a chance recording a black singer by the name of Mamie Smith for the label. Downplaying her color, they produced the record. And before you knew it, 75,000 copies were sold just like that. Bradford's recording was so successful that the label launched a series called Original Race Records, a term coined by Ralph Peer, and the rest is history. Looking at the figures for the units sold, the major labels followed suit. Paramount Records released Ma Rainey and Charlie Patton, not because they cared about supplying music for the interests of black people, but the pure capital potential releasing these records produced for OK Records. In 1926, OK Records achieved its goal and became a subsidiary to Columbia Records, a major label. This was an attempt by the major labels to cover the markets that was out there. These records were intended to be sold in the black community. They weren't even sure that whites would be interested in them, except for the main draws that were already proven, like the vaudeville acts and things of that nature. The term jazz and blues for our music began to become in vogue as more whites became amorous or took an interest in certain aspects of our music and needed to know that the music they were getting reflected the style of music they were trying to purchase. This is all about supply and demand, folks. In a capitalist society, somebody has to be capitalized off of. If you're on the bottom part of the pyramid, You better produce ways and means to protect your own interests, because the people that are on the top of the pyramid believe that they should benefit from the ways and means of those on the bottom of the pyramid. Nobody's trying to save you. Make your own help. You need it. Until next time, peace.